Hello and welcome to New England Killers, Cryptids, and Spirits, hosted by Alyssa West and
Ramsey Colby. Join us for the next 20 minutes where we discuss all things New England and all things scary. Lizzie Borden had an axe. Does that sound familiar? If you spent time on a playground any time in the 20th century, good chance you heard that nursery rhyme. In 1892, Andrew and Abby Borden were brutally murdered in their Fall River home. The prime suspect? Their own daughter, Lizzie. But did she do it? Was she a cold-blooded killer or a victim of circumstance? As lover of all things spooky, Alyssa and I are very excited to take a deeper dive into this world-renowned case.
to help us unravel this chilling enigma, we have a very special guest, Dr. Anette Holba. So settle in, turn down the lights, and prepare to question everything you thought you knew about Lizzie Borden. Today, we're going to chop through the myths and uncover the chilling reality.
Let's get started.
Dr. Anette Holba is not only a respected scholar, but also brings a unique perspective to this case. With a PhD in extensive research, including her book, Lizzie Borden Took an Axe, or Did She? A Rhetorical Inquiry, Dr. Holba has spent years examining the evidence, the theories, and the cultural narratives surrounding Lizzie Borden. Get ready for a fascinating discussion that challenges everything you thought you knew.
See you there.
Okay, Dr. Holba, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
I teach here at Plymouth State University in the Communication and Media Studies department, and I've been here 20 years. Prior to that, I was in law enforcement, where I worked sex crimes and homicide. That actually led to my curiosity about this case that we're going to talk about, which I won't say anymore until you ask me.
So as we talked about in the beginning of the podcast, we are covering the Lizzie Borden case this episode. Most people have an elementary understanding of the Borden case. How did you find yourself diving deep into it, Dr. Holba?
While I was still a county detective in New Jersey, I was also teaching in criminal justice programs at Rowan State University and Rutgers University. And while I was teaching at Rowan, they asked me to teach a course on women and crime. And so the first half of the course I organized as looking at women who enter the criminal justice system and deconstruct all that. And then I thought, let's highlight some notorious women and talk about their experiences in the system. And Lizzie Borden happened to be one of them. I went by decade, and I went back to the middle of the 1800s. The murders of Andrew and Abby Borden occurred in 1892, so she was in that decade. And I got fascinated, I think, because there's so much we don't know, but everyone talks about it and makes assumptions. So there's more factoids, which is not real or factual information. It's embellished, right? And I thought that we need to look at this more and find out, what do we really know and what don't we know?
Yeah, when you brought that up to other colleagues, what was their reaction like?
Oh, they were
to that
stunned.
case?
They were absolutely stunned. First of all, I used to teach a first-year seminar on Lizzie Borden, and students taking that course took it because they were familiar with that little rhyme. Lizzie Borden took an axe, gave her mother 40. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Whew. And
One breath.
right. And they thought that she was found guilty. They thought she actually did it. And of course, what we see on television, it always points to Lizzie being guilty. But we don't know that. That was never proven. And in fact, she was actually acquitted when she had her trial. And the reality is there was no direct evidence that would link Lizzie to the murders. But most people don't realize that, because I think of how Hollywood has taken the story, and it is a wonderful, mysterious story, but taken it and embellished with it. So students are very surprised when they find out things that I tell them that are just factual.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So as we spoke about, the Lizzie Borden case is filled with conflicting narratives and interpretations. In your research, what were some of the more surprising or contradictory elements you encountered?
That's a hard list to shorten, so I'll try to do my best with that. When I think of the movie with Elizabeth Montgomery back from the 70s playing Lizzie Borden, it was pretty similar to the facts of the case, and I get my facts from the inquest testimony that Lizzie gave and other people gave, as well as facts from the trial. What was most conflicting in that movie was the fact that John Morse, her biological uncle from her mother's side of the family, was at the house for a visit during the time of the murders. He came the day before Andrew and Abby were killed. He plays a significant role in trying to understand the context and the story of the 24 hours from the time he got there to the time they were murdered. But he wasn't even in the movie. Like, the mention of an uncle wasn't even there. His role there and his testimony at the inquest and his meetings with other people as he tried to develop his alibi are just so questionable, but nobody questions them. So that, to me, as a former detective, I think, man, I want that guy in a room. I spotlight on him. I want to have him for hours and get the truth out of him. But that didn't happen. But that is really about how the story's told. But some other things, like people fail to even think about, was there a will? And a will was never found, but usually when people are killed, they're killed because of sex, money, greed, stuff like that, crimes associated with it. There's different reasons why people are killed. And then, of course, that passion, the love kind of tryst. But no one really asked about money. And there were certain things that were unexplained that occurred with other people close to the family that could open insight into the possibility of a will destroyed. And that was never even followed. That line of questioning wasn't even followed in the investigation. So to me, that was pretty big, because whenever I had a murder that I was investigating, one of my first questions would be, who's benefiting from this crime? What was all involved, whether it be money or a will or drugs or something like that. So, just so many questions were not asked. Then, as a former detective, that really blew my mind. Actually, I was a detective when I first discovered the case, but even when I left and I wrote a book on Lizzie, that played a pretty big role, just the lack of questioning around that. Yes, I was very disappointed with the investigation, but at the same time, it was a wonderful investigation because the Fall River police were not, I would say, were not qualified, like they didn't have homicide training. The first police officer who arrived at the scene got sick. And I can understand that when you get to a real bloody, gory scene.
Yeah, that's quite a scene to roll into if you're not used to
Absolutely. And they just weren't used to it. So for the experience level that they were at, I think they tried their best and did the best that they could, but there's so much missing, which makes it hard to solve today. So maybe those are a couple of the things. Plus, the whole ditty is wrong. Andrew didn't have... Okay, so Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. It wasn't her mother, it was her stepmother. Big difference, especially back then. And she didn't have 40 whacks. She had about 18 to 21. Andrew didn't have 41. He had between 9 and 11. So, they even embellished the wound count. If you want to understand how they died and what their injuries were, read the actual autopsy report, and you can see what the coroner counted. And that gives you, I think, the best representation of their injuries.
Still, obviously, a crime of passion, but not 80 whacks.
Right. And these murders were close up and personal, which makes another conflict. If Lizzie did it, where was the blood?
Yeah, how would someone walk out of that house without just all the blood traces on
They
them,
wouldn't.
the patterns?
I had an axe murder when I was in law enforcement.
Wow.
And this man killed his girlfriend with a large axe. And so I had the pleasure of interviewing him and getting his confession. And he had blood spatter. I was close to him. There's a way maybe you and I were. Some of that stuff you just can't wash off. And so a lot of people say that she washed it off, or maybe she was naked, taking from the Hollywood version from the 1970s said that Lizzie was naked. she wouldn't be able to get the blood spatter out of her hair and off of the orifices around her face because they didn't even have running water.
Yeah, it's not like you're just going to hop upstairs and take a bath or a shower.
Which they did not have.
Yeah.
So that kind of stunned me that there's no blood on her. So how can we directly connect her to the crime? It's really difficult to do that. And so that to me always was a conflict, especially when there was testimony from witnesses. They did go through the neighborhood, how we do. We canvass the neighborhood and see what did you hear, what did you see, and all that. And people did see a buggy parked in front of the Borden home. And around the time of the murders, they also saw a male running down the street with a white jacket on, covered with blood on the time of the murders. And to me, I would want to know what that was all about, right? Whose buggy was it? Let's roll in or out, whatever the information is, and then find that person. But that never happened. And there was a point early in the investigation when the police said, basically, we know who did it. We're going to zero in. We're going to get our person. And that person was Lizzie. Well, as a detective, you never rule out anything. But why then would you just focus on Lizzie when you don't have any direct evidence linking her to the case? That was asked of the police. And do you know what they answered? She didn't like her stepmother, so she had to have done it. Because Lizzie actually, when they asked her in the house, when they were asking questions, and they said to her, who would want to hurt your mother? Lizzie said, she's not my mother. She's my stepmother. And Lizzie wasn't getting along with her stepmother or her father at that time. Neither was her sister, Emma. Emma was 9 years older than her. Emma was never a possible suspect in the case. It was only Lizzie. Anyway, for the wrong reason, they chose Lizzie to be their culprit. And they did everything they could from that point on, which was the day of the murders, to find evidence against her. So they disregarded the other evidences that were and clues that were coming in.
So is it that Lizzie wasn't the one who actually did it?
Oh, so now you're asking me who did it, right?
Yeah.
What I can say is we know very little about the case. We think we know a lot because Hollywood has told us many different renditions of it. But here's the thing. We know that 2 people died. They were murdered by a blunt instrument, and they had pretty significant wounds all around the back of the head, the neck, the face, the upper torso part of their bodies. And they died in their home. We don't know anything else after that. We do know who was there.
Seems like a game of Clue. Like
It is. It's a wonderful game. Oh, I would love to orchestrate that. But that's all we know. 2 people are dead. And there was a very robust crime scene in the sense that there was a lot of blood, right? A lot of blood spatter. But whatever was going on in the home, and there was controversy in the home about money and what Andrew wanted to give some money to Abby's family because they had some financial difficulties. But that money would have taken money away from Lizzie and Emma. Life was so different back then. Lizzie was 32 at the time. Emma was 9 years older. Women of that age would have been married already and having their own kids. Lizzie and Emma did not get married, ever. They were relying on their father's wealth, and he was wealthy, to get them through the rest of their lives. But now it was looking like Andrew was going to share that with some of Abby's relatives, which is not out of the ordinary because Abby stepped in when Sarah died and raised his 2 daughters. So whatever was going on in the house, we only know a little bit of it. But both Lizzie and Emma had the same motive, perhaps, if one of them did it.
So you've spent some time in the Borden house. What can you share about us with that time regarding the case?
I've stayed the night a couple of times, and I got to know that the house has sold and resold over time. But when Leanne Wilbur owned it, I got to know her more, I think, than the other owners. And so one time I was doing a book signing the next day at the Historical Society, and I wanted to come down the night before because a snowstorm was coming. And I took my daughter, who's an adult, and she said, yeah, just stay at the house. We're not going to be there. They had a holiday party at one of the restaurants in town. So I said, okay, like I'm not thinking anything odd of it. And so my daughter and I got there, and someone was at the house, but then they left. And so we were just there, and it was neat to be stuck in the house with no one else. A lot of people say it's haunted. I am not going to go there. I'm going to say there's a lot of sounds in that house. The basement, I wouldn't want to go down there. But different things happened in the house that I thought were interesting and energetically, I'll just say, quite interesting. And I would say anyone who wants to go get a tour of the house, you ought to do it, especially if you're trying to figure out how to understand the story. You cannot have a true understanding of that story if you don't go into the house. So if you really want to try to understand it, don't be afraid of the ghosts or whatever is in there. Just go and enjoy it, but keep an open mind, and don't let any biases that you take with you shape what your understanding becomes. You just got to look for the facts, look for the evidence, and see it for what it is. 2 people died in the house. That's all we know. Ramsey, you were saying you saw the crime scene photos. When those photos were taken, the bodies had already been moved. Like today, when you go into a crime scene, you don't touch the bodies at all. You take the pictures first. Then you can move them or turn them or do whatever. But back then, they weren't skilled at that, and the police did move Abby's body, and they had to try to remember how she was and then put her back for the pictures. So to understand that scene and realize how narrow it was between the bed and the dresser, because she fell when she got hit.
You can tell in the photos that there's not a lot of wiggle room.
There's
right there.
very little wiggle room. And you can also get a sense of where the blood spatter would have been. So you can see it barely on the crime scene photos. And then when you're standing in the room, it'll give you a sense of, oh, what was she doing? She was bending over because the blood spatter is at a certain level. So it was just really interesting for me to see the layout of the spaces up there. And then also, people talk about the bathroom and that Lizzie could have washed herself off. There was a pump in the kitchen and a little hole, like a little outhouse down in the basement. Like that is, and there is, to me, I thought there's no way that she could have washed herself off. There is no way. And also, if you're washing yourself off standing in a little bucket, there's going to be blood spatter. So there's so much that didn't support a lot of the assumptions people were making. I probably wouldn't have recognized that if I didn't go there myself and see the area.
So if you end up going to the house, always go there with an open mind.
Yeah, because, again, we only know that 2 people were murdered there. That's it.
So to wrap up our session, what would you like to really get through to listeners about this case?
Have a curiosity and have an open mind. Read everything you can and then go there and make up your own mind. Don't listen to others and don't listen to Hollywood.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Holba. It was so fun to have you here and talk about all the nitty-gritties of this case, and we thank you very much for spending some time with us today.
This was wonderful.
Awesome.
Great, yeah.
Love it. To our listeners, if you are interested in the Lizzie Borden case, Dr. Holba did write a book on this story, Lizzie Borden Took an Axe, or Did She? A Rhetorical Analysis. Highly recommend you check that out if you're interested in that story.
Or if you're just interested in Anette Holba as a person. She is a great leader and teacher, and she has many published works on a variety of topics. So
Thank you. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you
you.
for having me.
This is the end of our show today. Thank you for joining us in our conversation on the Lizzie Borden axe murder case.
a special thank you to our guest today, Dr. Anette Holba. We hope to see you next time. This has been New England Killers, Cryptids, and Spirits with Alyssa West and
Ramsey Colby.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.